And that's such a powerful thing because Nyan at the time when someone says it,
You're like,
nah,
playing
come on.
games.
Hey, this guy's joking,
Yeah.
but taking me for a joke. But now looking back at that whole journey to that very moment, what emotion comes to mind, when you think about that conversation itself?
I think gratitude.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I'd say gratitude is the one that
What?
stands out.
Yeah.
Without being overly emotional,
Yeah.
I'd say I'm extremely grateful um, to the people who've been with me along the way.
Mm.
Some aren't with me
Mm.
anymore. Some still are.
Mm.
I'm Babalwa Latsha, and this is my story in my words.
Greetings, Sanbonani. Good morning, good afternoon, depending what time you're watching it. Welcome to our documentary, Women's Month documentary, Her Game, Her Story. And today we are joined by a very special guest. She said she's done a lot of interviews, but this one is going to be different, as we all know it. But she's the first African woman, first professional African women's rugby player. Babalwa Latsha, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me. Gosh, it's been a long time coming. I think you've been trying to get me on here
Yeah.
for quite a while. But yeah, good to
No,
good to be
thank
chatting
you.
with you.
No, listen, thank you very much for firstly taking the call. I think it came at a very ideal time as well, going into Women's Month and celebrating women, but most importantly, also coming back to your story because in the build up, I've had some conversations with people and I've been playing a joke on people, not a joke, but I've been asking a question to people. Women's rugby is a sport. When do people think the first woman got paid to play rugby? And some of the answers, people are saying 94, 93, 1990. And I'm like, 2020. And they're like, what?
As recent as that.
That's recent. But, thank you for taking the call to join us and share the story. And I think people will go onto social media, people will go onto YouTube and, Google. They'll find a lot about you. But I think one thing we take pride in is having you share your story and own the narrative that your story is told in. And with those words, I want to ask you, where did sport in general, we're not going to go into rugby yet, but,
Yeah.
Growing up, what are your first memories of sport?
Well, gosh, sport has always been part of my family,
Yeah.
part of my life. My parents played sport. My father played football. He ran track and field or track in high school. So did my mother. She was a sprinter. She played netball. I think she did high and long jump at some point.
Yeah.
Well, I never inherited the speed genes, but like sport was always part of my life. And I played football before in college. Actually, before I played rugby, I did athletics as well, shot put, discus throw, and javelin. Those were my things because I was quite a strong girl growing up. So Yeah, I think sport has always been part of my life. It's always been part of my family. My uncles played cricket and things like that. So where there was sport, you were most likely going to find me.
Find you. So were you the child that if Omalum and the uncles and your father are going towards the sports field, they'll find you there.
I'd
People will
always tag
tag
along,
along.
especially with my dad, because he played football, like I told you,
Mm.
but he also coached a football team, at some point. So
Yeah.
I was always, it's either I'm carrying balls
Yeah.
or I'm carrying his boots. Until now, I got my first pair of boots and
Yeah.
like started playing as well and got involved in all of that. So I'll definitely tag along for
Mm.
sure.
And mentioning those first pair of boots, that's something quite special when a child gets that. Can you remember that period?
My first pair of boots, I do actually. It was some. Don't even remember the brand. It
Mm.
was, but I do remember the feeling
Link, yeah.
of getting boots. You like, it's you're excited
Mm.
because it's like, oh my gosh, my
So
first
first
pair of
pair of
boots. I'm not
boots.
gonna play in techies anymore.
Yeah.
You feel like you're an actual soccer player
Okay.
or sports
Sure.
person. Or at the time for
Mm.
me.
And were you also those kids? I know when I got my first pair of boots, I got them after work. Mom came back from work, brings the pair of boots, and like, yo, practice is
Can't wait for
after
tomorrow.
school. I'm gonna wear them now in the house. Were you also like that?
Yeah, I couldn't wait for practice the following
Yeah.
afternoon. I was like, yo guys, hey
Of
Ndineko.
course, it doesn't
Yeah,
leave.
and that's why I know exactly what that feels like.
Yeah. And I want to ask you also, like, the sports side of things. Were you one of those kids that academic sport? Which one was for you, or was it
A
both?
bit of both
Mm.
actually. A bit of both. I was quite a bright kid. I did really well at school. Together with sport. I think in matric I got like probably 4 distinctions.
Mm.
So I wasn't too bad until I got to university. I mean, life was completely different,
Yeah.
obviously. But I managed to complete my law degree while playing sport, being
Mm.
fully involved
In sport.
in rugby and things like that. So I believe the two go hand in
In
hand.
hand.
And I think once you strike a balance between those two, I think those are really, really good tools to have in your toolbox.
Mm. You know, having more and more conversations with women athletes, I'm learning something. When it comes to a sport, you speak to people and you say sports athletes. A lot of the time, the connotations that come with being an athlete is you're not really academically. You don't take on a post high school qualification.
Hmm.
But when you speak more and more with women athletes, you'll find in Nukba, they have degrees. They are studying towards actual qualifications. What would you say that, what contributes to that when you look at your own journey?
Well, I can tell you this for free. One thing
Mm.
about women, we're incredibly tenacious and
Mm.
ambitious, on and off the field, like in life generally. We're much more, well, at least in my opinion, we're much more resilient
Mm.
because a lot of the time for us, there's a lot more at stake. So one tends to want to set them up, or set themselves up for
Mm.
a better future beyond the now. Um, I looked at the long term, at the bigger picture.
Mm.
Because for me, especially in rugby, a rugby career is relatively short, and God forbid you one bad injury away from it ending.
Mm.
So you know, aligning your passions are important to me. And for some people, passions look like sport and academics.
Mm.
Passion looks like academics and maybe being a sports presenter or being an interviewer.
Mm.
For me, I admire people who do that because it sort of it shows that um, you know, people are limitless, man. Women are limitless.
Yeah. Yeah. And before we dive into your career, I want us to just take it back to growing up. And the question I want to ask you, growing up at Kailicha with dad and mom and the family, what are some of the challenges that you had as a child growing up?
Look, growing up in a township of any kind, especially one that's notorious or as notorious
Mm.
as Khadija, it always presents, a unique set of challenges. And I had my own. Growing up in a vibrant community, but which posed quite a couple of risks, especially for me because I loved being outdoors.
Mm.
I loved sports, so sometimes I'd want to train outside. You have to watch what time you're
Yeah.
outside,
Mm.
what you're wearing, where you're going. and that I felt sort of put a cap on my potential in terms of physical development and even developing within the sport that I loved. So I think that was, the main challenge for me. Having access to facilities for training and things of that nature. And just being scared for your life sometimes. Because you get to witness things that nobody should witness. Least of all, not a young girl. And just think to yourself, man, I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to become another statistic. I don't want to end up there. And I think that's what sparked the desire for me to want to do well at the things that I'm good at. To want to succeed, to want to do better, to want to become better, because I had this hope of just something better. And so that then also makes me want to contribute to my community even more, and want to be of value somehow, be a positive point of reference for another girl in college to say, hey, look, you don't have to end here. There's a Babalwa Latsha who's grown up in similar circumstances, if not identical. You look at people like Siakuli, so but he had the hope, and you have to put action to hope. So yes, let's allow people to dream and hope, but put things in place and action those.
And listening to your story, you say family, there was a sport in mom, dad, which sets you up. I mean, those genes, if mom and dad sport wise, that's already like a step forward beyond. But I believe in rugby itself, it's something that you picked up at university, at the University of the Western Cape. I want us to go back to that time, because you joined the University of the Western Cape. You're not playing rugby at the time, but there's a story of how you then get into rugby. I want us to get into that story. What happened?
I think I got into rugby seriously at the University of the Western Cape. Funny enough, I started with sevens. I was approached by, I think, 2 or 3 girls who told me I looked like I could play rugby. And they asked me to join the sevens team. I was like, yeah, why not? I just went there, honestly, just to try it. And when I first did, it was like I had discovered this whole new world. About this whole new space where, like, my physique was acceptable. I wasn't too big or too strong or too muscular or anything like that. I found a place, and for me that meant or felt like freedom. And I think that's one of the reasons why I decided to continue to play the sport, because I was also surrounded by amazing women, who themselves were not shy to celebrate themselves, celebrate their physicality, embrace that they can be part of such an amazing sport that traditionally people considered to be for men. And for me that was the game changer for me. I was like, you know what, I've fallen in love with the sport. I've found a home in the sport, and I appreciate what it presents or can present, to me. And so I just decided to just go with it, and the rest is history, I suppose.
And really, Nyani, the rest is history from that moment. But I want us to go back into that moment of you being approached to take this thing up a bit seriously, and you're going into the 7th setup of the university. Were there any reservations from your side about, going into the sport that has always been seen as a predominantly male sport?
Well, if I'm honest with you, not really. I think those types of things didn't really come to light until I was properly playing and properly involved. Because like I said, I had started with the 7th team, then graduated into the 15th setup. Next thing I was making national teams. Next thing I was, on the provincial side, even captaining the provincial side, probably like 5 times. Getting into the Springbok women, captaining that side as well. Going to a 7s World Cup, a 15s World Cup, and then you start to realize that there's something beautiful brewing here, but there are a couple of impediments to it, in terms of how it's viewed, and what people think about it, especially what young people think about it. And I think that's where we come in.
Yeah.
To say, hey, actually, this is fun. This
Mm.
is for everyone. You know, you don't have to be a specific shape to play. You don't have to look like anything. Just be yourself. Bring yourself. You know, and have fun. That's actually initially what it was about for me. I just went for fun. Until then, you know, you start to see things differently. You start to become somewhat of an activist for the sport as well, because you get to understand the benefits that you can reap from it. You know, but it's so exciting and so beautiful for me, because you get to witness the transition of initially when you get in, people think it's for males, and then you get to witness the transition. You see it grow and you see it develop. You see more young girls enjoying the sport. You see dads taking their daughters to rugby
Correct.
training,
Yeah.
which is absolutely amazing and beautiful in my view. So women's rugby has grown so much, and it's just, yeah, it gives me goosebumps to think about the potential that it still has.
And you know, you then take it up in university. You said you went through the 7 setup and then into the 15 setup. But I want to ask you, you know, at what point in time did it occur, or did it ever occur at that time, you know, that this might actually be a career? Because at university you were there to study your law degree, but did it ever occur in the mind, this could be the bread and butter for a couple of years?
It did, actually. It did, and I can specifically recall the moment that it did.
Mm.
I had a conversation with my mentor, Advocate Loaz Mzozoyan, and he put something that, like, at the time, it sounded really wild.
Mm.
It sounded crazy because I didn't see it. And so I think when he put the idea in my head to say that, you know what, women's rugby is a thing. It is a career. It can be a career. And it just needs a little bit of courage and bravery for you to take that step, to say that this is going to be my career. I'm going to take this forward. We are the ones who are going to be positive role models. We are the ones who are going to break, barriers. We are going to be the pioneers. We are going to be the firsts of many things. You know, at that time, I have to be honest with you, at the time it sounded like, what is this man talking about? Then I heard it again and again and again, and then it sounded doable. Then I believed it. I think that was the most important thing. The penny dropped for me when I believed it. And then once I started believing it, my actions changed. You know, my behavior changed. My outlook towards it started to change, and everything just started aligning towards it, one way or another. You know, so I think that was the moment for me when I started to believe what that man told me. And I put all my energy and efforts towards that. And, you know, the universe just has a way of recognizing hard work, recognizing, you know, how much you believe into something. And then opportunities start to open up. And one looks back and thinks that, gee, was all I had to do actually was just believe in this so much that all my, you know, life's actions were geared towards it.
Yeah. And you know, that's such a powerful thing, because Nyan, at the time when someone says it,
You're like,
nah,
playing
come on.
games.
Hey, this guy's joking. But, you know, taking me for a joke. But now looking back at that whole journey to that very moment, what emotion comes to mind, you know, when you think about that conversation itself?
I think gratitude.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd say gratitude is the one that
What?
stands out.
Yeah.
Without being overly emotional,
Yeah.
I'd say I'm extremely grateful to the people who've been with me along the way. Some aren't with me anymore. Some still are. So yeah, extremely grateful for people who've just put things in place to help me, and who's made it their business to ensure that I have everything that I need. I get to where I need to be, both physically and mentally. You know, people who literally went out of their way to open up doors for me, at least for me to get a foot in the door. You know, because I don't think if I hadn't met some people along the way, some coaches, mentors, and things like that, I don't ever think that my mindset would have been the same.
Mm.
I don't think that my outlook, to, to the world and the visions that I had for myself and the things that I'm involved in would have been the same. So I'm just extremely grateful for my community and even the people who to drop DMs
Mm.
on social media to be like, hey, well done. Like we see you, we appreciate
Mm.
what you're doing for our community and for our country, even like anybody. So yeah, to answer your question, I think the biggest thing is gratitude.
True.
I'm just really grateful.
Mm. So the university student, we go back to that time of university. University student makes provincial setup. This thing goes from sevens rugby to 15s.
Mm-hmm.
You break into the provincial setup of women's rugby. You play in the premier division of the women's rugby competition, the top tier, and you play for quite some time. You even start to captain this team. Looking back at that time with the Western Province, how was that journey as a young girl that's still studying? You still got your studies. You haven't left that.
Yeah.
But now there's this rugby thing that's happening even on a provincial scale.
Quite a tricky balancing act actually. But I think at provincial level, it was still, especially in the early days, it was still about just enjoyment.
Mm.
Yes, I play for Western Province. Yeah, I'm benched a lot. Type of a thing. It wasn't as intense. But I think as then my career progressed, comparatively from my first season to my fifth or fourth,
Mm.
a lot had happened in that period, and of course I had to still balance that with studying. I yes, it's crazy now that I think about it. I would literally train like 2 to 3 times a day. So before class,
Mm.
I would go to the gym in the morning. We used to call it the dungeon back in the day
Yeah.
at UWC. Well, we have a high performance center now, but
yeah.
there was the gym underneath the stadium.
Mm.
So I would go there early in the morning, train, go to class, finish classes, go back to the gym and train again. Then in the afternoon, like evening-ish, I would then go to provincial training. So by the time I got to my provincial training, I had already trained like twice already. And that was normal for me,
Mm.
So, and then after training at night, go back, study, because I obviously had to prepare for class,
Mm.
tutorials, or even a test type of thing. I think I was bordering on obsession.
Mm.
If I'm being really honest with you, I was bordering on obsession. Like, I just didn't see myself doing anything else. Like, I was like, I don't care if I have to wake up at like 6 or even
for this
5 in
thing.
the morning to get a training session in. For me, that was normal because
Mm.
I was obsessed with that. And so, like, at 21, like, I had started like playing like serious rugby and getting seriously into training. I think the obsession that I had was what accelerated my career.
Mm.
I think I had a physical advantage because I was so crazy about
About it, yeah.
training, and like my physique fitted rugby so well that I did incredibly well at rugby.
Mm.
And I think that's what also sort of fast tracked really me being in leadership positions, because then at some point you become part of how to normalize
Yes. Mm.
being an incredible physical specimen within the rugby space, because the reality is, especially a couple of years ago, perhaps even now for some, is that our physiques are scrutinized so badly.
Mm.
The way that we look is scrutinized so badly, and like our existence is looked through a male prism, So I think that me wanting to build my body to that point was also somewhat fueled by that, because I was like, I don't care if I have large biceps or like, massive shoulders and traps. Of course, I must have that because
That
I play
phase,
rugby.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So that also then sort of told me to embrace my body. I'm gonna gain weight at some point. I'm gonna be unfit at some point. I'll get my fitness back at some point. I'll lose weight at some point. So with all its changes, I learned to embrace what it does for me. Because I put my body through an incredible amount of 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 pressure.
Sure, yeah.
So I think I just also learned, because I trained such a lot. I also learned to to look at my body a little bit more lovingly, and not to be so hard on myself. Yeah, so what if I don't fit in my favorite jeans anymore? But what does my body do? Like on the field of play, like what actually happens?
Yeah.
Incredible stuff that I can tell you.
Yeah. And you make mention of two things there. The obsession, number one, which you believe is what fast-tracked everything. I mean, training 3 times a day when the team is only training once a day, still balancing that with being a student full-time. And then also, the criticism and the comments that then come around being a woman's rugby player and training to be a rugby player, because essentially it is a physical sport. It is a sport that requires you to go to the gym, pick up heavy weights, build muscle, because off season you need to build, bulk up. And as a female, having such comments about you, growing up, how were those comments? How did you fight such comments? Because it is something that's still happening today.
I think over time you develop a thick skin. You develop a wall. In conjunction with your mental fortitude. Because if I had to stop what I was doing for every negative comment, I don't think I would have gotten anywhere, if I'm being honest with you. You get to understand yourself. You become I became very rooted in understanding who I am, what I represent. I've done the work, so nobody can take that away from me. And that's the one thing that just keeps me rooted in that, gosh, I've done the work. I work extremely hard. Nobody can take that away from me. I know who I am. I know what I stand for. So a comment saying I've gotten bigger isn't going to change the fact that I'm a humble individual. I value relationships. I love what I do. It's not going to change any of that. It's not going to change what my name is. It's not going to change the way that I breathe. It's not going to put money in my bank. So it's for me, it becomes irrelevant, at some point. You need to find anchors, I think. For younger people, it might be not as easy as how I'm putting it. You find anchors. There has to be something that anchors you, to say that I can't be shaken by anything.
Such a comment,
Honestly, nobody can shake me.
Yeah.
Nobody.
And you make mention of the anchors for you. What was that anchor at that time?
It's Kaloko being rooted in understanding me,
who you are,
who I am, and like what I stand for, what I represent, my passions. Even just think about the things that you're good at. I might maybe drop a ball in a game, but I'll have a brilliant scrum.
After that.
So this is really understanding what you're good at, understanding who you are. Embracing what you contribute to your sport, because we're not all going to be fast. So somebody's going to tell you're slow. We're not all going to be strong. Somebody's going to tell you you're weak. But if I know, I'm really good at what I do. I'm a good scrummager. I'm a good this and that. And I'm not saying that in an arrogant way,
right.
But it's more about you bringing yourself to yourself.
Yeah. And going back to that time of you, Dubs, you now training 3 times a day, playing provincial rugby. But there's a time, 2020, January. There's something about you and January. January seems to be, seems to be your time. It seems to be a time of kicking down doors. January 2020, that's COVID year, but that didn't hinder you. But January 2020, the opportunity comes to go to Spain. How did that come about? Because that's a very remarkable time in the history of women's rugby in this country.
Well, how that opportunity came about was I was actually scouted. They watched our game against the Springboks, against Spain. Our game, that is the Springbok women, against Spain in Port Elizabeth. And they'd obviously come over with the Spanish team, and they'd watch our game, and they were like, we want that one.
She's coming home with us.
We have to grab her. And so they got into contact. And we negotiated, and I was like, this is an opportunity. A little bit of a scary one, because there was no blueprint at the time. Like nobody went of any color in the whole continent. Nobody has gone to a different country to play rugby professionally. You're not an exchange player, not an exchange anything. This is full on professional rugby.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out, what does professional rugby look like? How do I contribute in a professional space?
Yeah.
There's a contract involved now.
Yeah.
I get paid to play rugby. What is expected of me? What do I need to do? So I had to figure out all those things. Figure out how to be away from my parents, how to be away from home, how to be away from familiarity, how to deal with homesickness, how to bounce back if I feel I didn't have a good game. Like, nobody told me how to do all those things. I had to figure those things out. So, long story short, I went over there, I played for the club, and they really welcomed me very warmly. Yeah, they embraced me quite warmly, and I found some type of a community there. But yeah, of course, like there's nothing like home. There's nothing like home. It's actually insane that you even miss speaking your own language.
Yeah.
You miss just hearing a familiar language, seeing a familiar face or even skin tone.
Yeah.
It's those types of things. But yeah, I think that whole experience sort of set me up to take on other experiences better and easier.
And we said it becomes a very pivotal moment in women's rugby in South Africa, on African continent as a whole, because you essentially now become the first African professional women's rugby player. Moving across, you were navigating uncharted waters, because this has never been, you said it, there's no blueprint to say this is what a professional women's rugby player from Africa does and all of that. But the challenges you've mentioned, I want to ask you the language. I went on to, the name of the club is Iba Rugby Taldia. Iba. I tried to go onto their website to read. How did you deal with the language barrier?
Yeah, I think that was actually quite a big challenge. Fortunately, my translator was also on the team, so she was close by a lot of the time. I never truly got to learn any Spanish or even Basque, because there are two languages spoken in the northern region of Spain. It's Basque and Spanish. So I heavily relied on the translator and Google Translate and all those things. But you know what? The rugby is rugby.
Yeah,
a tackle will always be a tackle. The rules of the game don't change. So this just the only thing was that I didn't quite know how to communicate properly with them, but a couple of them would be able to to stitch up a couple of sentences here and there, or even words. But yeah, no, it was just overall enjoyment. You can't translate energy, and I think what I brought was energy. What they brought as well was great energy. So I think that's what helped to somewhat mitigate the language barrier.
And going across to Spain and playing rugby that side, how was the rugby when you got there? Like the differences in the rugby that you've been playing in the country going across, because you left after having already made your international debut for the Springboks women's side. Now going across into a professional setup, how was that for you?
Yeah, so I had gone from representing my country into an international club. I think that the transition wasn't all too difficult, because a national team operates as a professional unit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You still have to train a couple of times a day. You still have to analyze. You still have to go through team meetings and the like. So I think then me going into that setup wasn't much of a big difference, because it operates more or less the same. You do the same things. You go through team meetings, you train, you analyze opponents, you play games on a regular basis and things like that. So from a purely work perspective, it wasn't such a big as a purely rugby perspective, it wasn't such a big transition, but it was more the environment, the people. Obviously, I then became a foreigner, and so there was just a lot of things of me having to figure out, how do I get from point A to point B? How do I get to the shops? How do I go grocery shopping? How do I even take a train to visit, I don't know, Madrid or something like that? Traveling, things of that nature.
And looking at that time now, what are some of the key lessons that you would have taken out of that experience of being in Spain and playing professional rugby in the country?
Mm. Well, like a huge sense of pride. I've always been proud of representing my country and playing for an international club. The takeaways from that for me would be like to keep an open mind, you know, be open to learning,
Mm.
be open to embracing different cultures, be willing to also share yours as well. I think the world is an incredible place if you bring yourself
Self to it, yeah.
to it. So yeah, I think just keeping an open mind and not limiting myself to where I currently am. There's lots to explore, lots to do. Yeah.
And you come back into the country, still part of the national setup, and then January again. January 2020, and then January 2023. There's another opportunity that comes up, this time around in England with the Harlequins Women's Rugby Club. At that time, it's coming at a time when we now have a women's national director of rugby. Rugby for women we're putting proper structures for it in place, and in comes this opportunity to head across. What went through your mind this time around you've already been out of the country as a professional rugby player, but now you're going to Harlequins?
Yeah, it was quite a big deal actually for me, because the PWR is one of, if not the best league in the world. And I'm not thumb-sucking this. It's an actual fact. So now I'd gotten to play against the best in the world. Not the best in South Africa or the best in Spain. The best in the world. The English are in the top 2, if not at the top right now in women's rugby. So on a regular basis, I get to play against the best props, the best fly halves, the best. So which then meant it had to be a step up for me because the quality of the rugby is a lot higher. So I got the call to say, hey, we're interested in you. Then I thought to myself, what can I do to get myself at world-class level? And then I started going at it again. I started training like crazy. I started preparing. It was more a preparatory phase than anything else. And I had already had probably like 28, 29 caps representing the Springbok women, playing international rugby against nations like France, England even, Fiji and the like. So I had to just put things into perspective for myself to say, hey, look, one, you are good enough. You don't have to do anything special outside of your abilities of what you're doing. If anything, this opportunity means it's a recognition of the Springbok women for one. It's a recognition of South African women's rugby, but it's a recognition of you and your talent. So go over there, give it your best shot, be yourself, embrace everything that comes with that, and see where it takes me. And so I did just that. And 18 games, well, first 8 games, the first season, then I went again for another season, second season, which was last season. 18 games, about 4 tries, 2 women of the matches, and one award. So it's safe to say that, we are very much on the right track, because I'd like to think that my individual success is sort of a reflection of what is happening in the country. South African women's rugby has taken off incredibly. And what I love is that there are people who have put concerted efforts around putting systems in place for us to do well. So we went from having one person go out a couple of years ago to having about 4 or 5 South African players who now play in the English Premiership. So I think that for me it was a massive opportunity, and I enjoyed every single experience that came with it. Because if you play against the best week in, week out, you become the best. You become world class. So it's safe to say that I can consider myself to be a world class tight head prop.
And I love the way you mention it, of being out there week in, week out, playing in the best league in the world against the best players in the world week in, week out, you are going to be the best as well in the world. And, looking at the time now that you've spent out of the country, because we just had a laugh off air that you're chasing winters. You're
Essentially,
not
that's what
chasing
it is.
summers, you're chasing winter. But for you, what are some of the learning perspectives or the lessons that you are now taking out of being in a foreign country, playing in the best league in the world week in, week out?
I think I've sort of learned to refine for myself what professionalism looks like. I've learned to understand the things that I'm able to contribute, my unique skills, what makes me unique.
Mm.
Nobody does me better
Better
than
than
I do me, So I think that was what I had to learn how to do, to not try to fit in, just be myself. As cliche as it sounds, like there's nothing that beats being yourself, because
Mm.
there's only one of you, and the things that you're able to contribute in any setting, only you can do that.
Mm.
And so I learned then to be like, you know what, rugby is rugby, but outside of that, what am I able to contribute to the club, to the community of London, I suppose,
Mm.
and just to give a good representation of South African women's rugby. So I had to learn how to do those things. I had already gotten an idea of how to do that throughout the years, but I felt this time around, because the stakes a little bit higher. You're in a high intensity environment, high performance. With all of that, what does it look like to be a South African women's rugby player in a high performance environment? What does it look like to be me in a high
Mm.
performance environment? So I had to learn those things.
Things. And, coming back now with all the wealth of experience that you've picked up, you're one of the leaders in the South African women's national team, the Springbok women's team. Looking at the culture of the team, it's special. I mean, I watched the game. There was the series that you guys played in at UWC earlier on this year.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing the culture of the team and something special, which I haven't seen many teams embrace, allowing fans onto the field after a game and having those interactions with the player, with the fans, and everybody that's coming out to support. Looking at the team now and the growth that's happened with more players having the opportunity to leave and play internationally,
Mm-hmm.
how's the mood in the camp? How's that grown the game itself for the team?
I think South African women's rugby across the board has grown. We've just concluded our girls' week
Mm.
in Johannesburg, and it's so amazing to see girls from under 16 and 18 like play rugby so
So
well,
cool. Yeah.
you know, and like it's really it really is amazing to see them. Like, we're not short of talent.
Yeah.
That much I can tell you, and so that then filters into the senior setup, which is the Springbok women's team, which contributes to our dynamic as a group. There are women in our team with incredible life stories who've overcome so much, who have literally defied odds. Ordinarily, with their life stories, they shouldn't be where they are.
Mm.
But, they've done that. So I think those are the things that bring us closer together. Those are the things that makes us want to be positive role models. It makes us want to influence the next generation. And I think that we have the present to make our mark, but essentially the future lies with younger people, a younger group of a new generation of Springbok women. So ours truly is to try to inspire them to want to be in the green and gold, but more than that, to want to be, individuals or even collectives who are able to contribute positively to our country and our society and even our sport and whatever spaces that they find themselves in.
Yeah. People will say it's a player exodus. A lot of people, when it comes to the male rugby, they find it as a bad thing. But for women's rugby, I like the fact that we are embracing it because it means growth for our sports. And it's now coming across in the results. The 15s team has qualified for the WXV. I've been wondering how to pronounce this.
Yeah,
I see it.
it's called WXV.
WXV tournament. You're hosting it here in Stellenbosch. What are the thoughts for that coming up?
It's an exciting opportunity.
Yeah.
Last year's one was so much fun. We had Scotland, Italy, ourselves, Samoa, I think, in our tier. Now, we are this year we have Wales, Scotland, Italy, I think Japan, if I'm
New
not
Zealand, so
mistaken.
there, yeah.
So there's an incredible sort of cross pollination of nations. Because I think the more we play against one another, the better we all become, and that then makes for a more competitive World Cup, which is next year, in England, which the Springbok women, proud to say, we've qualified for that World Cup. So you will be seeing us
At the World Cup.
at the global stage at the World Cup. And so, in my opinion, so having more of us go abroad, we bring back experiences, we bring back knowledge. We figure out how to improve our own systems, because you've experienced and seen a different system or one of the best systems in the world, and we embrace that, because I think, as the tide rises, so do other boats.
Yeah.
So if one nation grows, so do the other. And so I think for me that then means that we're able to do better on the global stage. The sevens are heading to the Olympics as well. So there's just so much to look forward to. Like, there's so much to be excited about. I think we are probably at the best time that South African women's rugby, in my opinion, has ever been.
Yeah.
We've recently contracted a core group, which means now some of us can call themselves professionals. We are looking at growing that group even more, contracting even more people. So that means you're able to do rugby full time, which means your skills get better, you get better, the team gets better. We are then able to compete better. So I just find that to be absolutely amazing, because as recent as 5, 6, 7 years ago, things like that were just a dream.
And a wild one, it's all.
Until it came true. So it's really moving forward. It's moving in the right direction, in an exciting direction. And I think that, once the WXV starts in October, people should come out in droves to Athlone Stadium, to Stellenbosch, or wherever we play, and actually put bums on seats and watch the Springbok women. Because I find women's rugby to be so much more exciting. The skill set is better. It's just an exciting brand, of rugby. If I was anybody but a rugby player, I would want to watch women's rugby.
Nah, listen, I think it was the game. I think Kenya was here as well. And there was an invitational team when the games were being played at UWC. And seeing the children in the stands, I mean, that was something else. I mean, the excitement around it is also truly special. There's also the embracing of Igwijo nowadays within the rugby spaces, and that's made it even more spectacle to be a part of. And we mentioned the growth, we mentioned the players leaving, and something about you that I learned. Yes, you've got your law degree, but something you've said publicly is you want to get involved in the policy of rugby. You want to get onto a board seat of World Rugby. This is something that you as an individual, I know you're quite a big advocate for women's rugby and many other initiatives which we'll touch on. But if I'm to put you in that board of World Rugby, we give you that seat. Babalwa, you're there. Babalwa, you're the head of women's rugby, Babalwa. And your focus is Africa. Firstly, what's your assessment of the journey women's rugby's made and the journey it traveled, and what would you want for women's rugby going forward?
That is actually such a multi-layered question, which I think the answer to it is multi-layered as well. I think the women or the people who are on the boards currently are doing a great job of growing and developing women's rugby in different parts of the world, be it in the Pacific area, be it in Africa and in Asia and the like. But if I were to be put on that, or at least in a decision-making power, if I were to be the one person who signs off anything and say, do this now,
it's happening.
what I would do is on the continent as a whole, what I would do is I would create pathways in every country.
Yeah.
Every country must have a developmental pathway. There should be hubs and areas where girls from as young as 6 even are able to come together and be coached well or accordingly to their age groups in that hub. Get rugby into primary schools as early as that. Have tournaments, annual tournaments, even biannually tournaments where nations will play against one another. Build and create academies from junior setups already, like from junior ages, academies where you know especially girls can come in and play sport, and somehow, I don't know how, but somehow figure out how to structure that, how to make it into a well-oiled machine, so much so that over 4 to 8 years be able to track where a girl started, where she ends. Because I think one of the problems in the women's rugby space is player retention. So once a girl reaches a particular age, she's say I don't know, 18, between 18 and 20, in that gap, she then leaves high school. Now she's either in university or not, but there isn't anywhere for her to play in that gap. So create institutes and again academies where we are able to keep the girl in the sporting space and in the rugby space, but with that, couple it with education.
Yeah.
Couple it with skills development, couple it with fine tuning and nurturing what those young girls are interested in. And so by the time you graduate out of the institute or out of the academy or the hub, you come out with a qualification
Something,
of
yeah.
sort. And so then it will be up to you whether you want to pursue that or you want to get into the national team. Because if you think about it, in Africa we have 52 states, but a handful of them
Play rugby.
are playing rugby. Now imagine if we have an African tournament where all those states or
52 of
countries
them.
compete with one another, and then whoever wins that would obviously be crowned the champions of Africa. We do have an Africa Cup tournament, but it's like 4 nations that compete in that.
And
I
who's
think,
who's the reigning champs?
I mean,
Yeah.
the Springbok women are. And so in that tournament, there already are, some type of structures there. So within that tournament, get more. And how we would find those more is by creating academies and pathways and institutions and skills developmental, sort of facilities.
Yeah. And it's having people that have been through the system is also a very important thing, because nobody knows the challenges like those that have gone through them. And I think you making mention of the developmental pathways is something that if anybody else would have looked at it, they would have said, no, we just need them to play. But in order for them to play, it needs to start a lot younger at primary school level, like you said, having primary schools participate a lot more in rugby.
True, but I feel representation is everything. If I don't see it, I'm not gonna even hope to dream about it. So I also think that allowing ourselves to be visible, outside of a team setup, being a visible and identifiable individual, not brand but person, is also important. So I encourage it a lot. Like if you have time and you're a rugby player, go speak to someone, mentor a young girl from your neighborhood, or a couple of them, and just open up your lines of communication to them. Help them to understand that they can reach out to you for whatever. It makes a world of a difference, because in my experience, I don't think if I hadn't had somebody to be like, hey Chonga, what do I do? It would have been a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
So sometimes we think that it's this big change that needs to happen. We think it's this structure that needs to do this and that. There are structures. Rugby Africa is here. They are actively working to get
Build, yeah.
and to build. But it's the building phase, in my opinion, that's the most difficult. So to help that building phase, I think we should do the little things that we are able to do in our corners. Mentor young people, especially young girls. Like I said, open up your lines of communication. Make yourself accessible. Of course, as far as you deem fair. But yeah, I think we have to put ourselves out there as much as possible.
Mm. You're a person who juggles quite a lot.
Yeah.
You get involved in quite a lot, and I think it goes with the passion. I mean, you're a person who's quite passionate, number one, about the sport, but also about helping others around you. And there's a foundation that you are on the board of already as a director, and that's the Menstruation Foundation. I want us to just go a bit into the work that the foundation does, because it's absolutely amazing the way that you and the team have gone about championing period poverty. Do you want to share a bit more about what Menstruation Foundation is?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm involved in a whole lot of foundations purely because I'm passionate about it, and the Menstruation Foundation is one of the organizations that have a really close place in my heart, because it we try to address a critical problem. It's amazing that in 2024 we have the problem of period poverty. There are still young women and girls who are unable to go to school or stay out of school when they are on their period because they lack access to sanitary products. And so the team decided that, or the Menstruation Foundation decided that, we're going to change that. We are going to create access to free sanitary products to young girls in schools, in sports hubs, even at university, even at police stations, everywhere and anywhere where there are women, you are most probably going to find us. So we invented a sanitary pad vending machine, which gets sponsored by different companies and organizations that come on board. And we put it up in schools. It works on a token system. So we'll hand out a token to you and you just slot it in the machine and voila, you get a pack of pads at school. So you never need to stay out of school.
Yeah.
So you come to school to get access and you sort it for the month. And I think that it's an incredible sort of project. It's sustainable, and it blows my mind really to this day that condoms are free in our country, but not sanitary products.
You'll find them at a rugby stadium.
You get to choose to have sex, but you don't choose whether or not you get your period. And I feel that holds so many young women back. It creates a sense of ashamedness, if I may put it that way, because even the topic of the menstrual cycle and period is still considered to be a taboo in many societies and communities. And we're here to change that. We're here to say that you don't have to miss out on school or sport. Your menstrual cycle is actually a beautiful thing. It's nothing to be ashamed of. We have conversations even with boys in the room. That is important because they too then get to learn and to understand that, look, if we don't embrace the things that happen to our bodies, who will? And so ours is really to change the mindset of young people about women and women's bodies and what we go through, and to help them understand that it's not a dirty thing. It's not a taboo thing. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to hide about. It's a beautiful element of who you are. It's how your body functions.
Yeah.
It's like just coughing. It's like scraping your knee. It's a normal thing. So why do we shy away from a period, but not from a nosebleed? What's the difference?
Yeah.
There isn't.
And asking you now that there is the work of the Menstruation Foundation. You're also a Laureate Sport Foundation ambassador. I believe you're also involved in the Beast Foundation.
Let me tell you all the things that I do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Let me leave it to you.
So essentially, one of the directors of the Menstruation Foundation, Laureate ambassador, the Beast Foundation ambassador, a board member of an organization called Oh Graceland. There we create a pathway for young women who are transitioning out of foster care. Because once you get to the age of 18, you're no longer eligible to be. So you're by yourself, essentially. Yeah. So where do you go? And so we've created a safe space, an actual home where they get accommodation, and we help them, again, with skills development which helps them become independent. And so they get out of our care because we want them out. We get them in for them to go out, because that means they then become independent. What else do I do? Yeah, I think for now,
For now. But there's
there's
definitely more in the
there's
pipelines.
definitely more in the pipeline. I'm just incredibly passionate about making a positive impact in our society.
Mm,
And the best way that I can do that for now is to give of my time and my energy and some of my resources,
mm,
into those things and be in a position of somewhat to be able to make some decisions around how we go about, those things. I honestly just want to see young people, young women do well. Just want to see them reach their fullest potential. I want to see them break barriers. I want to see them, do things that people in their circles never thought were possible. I want them to, you know, just, be themselves and embrace what they're good at and not allow their current situations to sort of influence how they look at their future.
mm,
That's what I want for young women,
mm.
honestly.
And as we start to bring it back and start to summarize it, you make mention of the passion that you have for people breaking barriers, challenging the status quo,
Mm.
going over and above what people think is possible. Looking at your journey, going back to that conversation you had with the advocate about breaking these barriers, creating a livelihood from this thing, making a career out of this thing. I want us to go deeper. Um, you've said it. Mom, dad have been there to support this journey. There's the advocate. There's many other people who've
Mm-hmm.
supported the journey, and many are not around today. But if you were to look into the camera and, in a point of reflection, have a conversation or say something to those people that have been there in that journey with you, people who've reached out and, you know, plowed a seed in terms of building this journey for you and helping you
Mm.
along the way, what words would you have for them?
Yeah, just honestly to say thank you, to express a heartfelt message of gratitude because I wouldn't be where I am without them
Mm,
and their support. They've opened so many doors for me. They've put things into perspective for me. They've helped me to appreciate what little that I had, but also to embrace what more I can achieve. They've opened my eyes to myself and to the world. Although, yes, the journey is a long one, but we've come so far with those who have stuck around. And for that, I'll always be grateful.
yeah. And reflecting now yourself on the journey. I mean, it's been quite some time since you picked up the sport and you took it on quite seriously. Looking back now as the first African women's rugby player playing professional rugby in Europe, what do you personally make of this journey that has been? And what lessons have you taken out of that journey to share with the next generation?
Look, the journey continues. Um, there's more to be achieved. There's more to be done.
Mm.
Of course, reflectively, one is proud of how far she's come, and but also understands how far yet we still have to
To
go.
go. Yeah.
Um, of course, I can never be too happy to be where I am. I'm always ambitious. I'm always looking for the next thing to do. Um, but what I can do and what I do best is rugby,
Mm.
is me, and are my passions. So I'm excited for myself what the next 5 years maybe holds for me, what it holds for the game and the people involved in it. So yeah, it's just we've come a long way. We
Mm.
truly have. From growing up in Kailicha, first picking up a rugby ball, and going to a Sevens World Cup, which was ridiculous for me at the time because it was but a dream,
Mm.
but it came true. To a 15s one, not many people can say they've been to a
Sevens and a
Sevens and a
15.
15s World Cup, and
Mm.
potentially another one. So there's lots more barriers to be broken. I think even post my playing days, I think I would still very much be involved in the sport one way or another. Perhaps even streamlining the legal qualification with sport. But for now, the focus is to be as best prepared as I can be for another season with the Harlequins and the Springbok women.
Yeah. And, in closing, looking back now at this journey that has been, what's that one piece of advice that you've received that has stuck with you?
It was actually said in isiXhosa,
Mm.
"Suzikhange teaspoon,"
Mm.
meaning that "Suzithatha kancinci." Don't sell yourself short.
Mm.
Don't ever think that you don't belong, that you're not good enough, that you deserve less. No, you deserve more because you're capable of more and you've been through more. So there's just more coming your way. And also to understand that, yes, be humble. Humility is important to me, but also understand my worth, understand the value that I bring to any environment. To understand the fact that there is no one like me, and so that then influences how you go about in those environments. Kodwa kuyo yonke into, don't sell yourself short. Suzikhange teaspoon.
The previous guest leaves a question for the next guest, not knowing who the guest is going to be. But you'll have the privilege of knowing who the question was from. And Michael Morton, Cape Town Spurs football player, has left you a question asking, if you could go back and do it all again, what would you change?
I wouldn't change anything, actually. I wouldn't want to change anything because I think everything that has happened and even not happened until now has shaped the type of person that I am now and how I view things. And if I'm going to embrace the journey and I'm going to embrace and enjoy where I am, I can't hate the experiences that shaped all of that.
Yeah.
So it's a good question, but I honestly don't think I would want to change anything.
It's all been worth it.
It's all been worth it. And everything happened because it was supposed to. Because I think it was, in hindsight, it was leading me to something. So if I change anything or want to change anything, would it then really lead me to where I am now? Would the narrative and story still been the same? I don't know. So I wouldn't want to change anything.
Yeah. And one final question from my side that I'm going to ask you is, we now see so many girls pick up a rugby ball and play rugby, which is absolutely beautiful. On social media this week, it's been dominated by the Girls Week, under 18 and under 16. Some amazing tries. There's the one EP girl, I'll share it on our platform. The one try I saw was incredible. Like the girl got the ball within a 22, ran through the whole team to get to the other side. So much talent coming through. And I want to ask you, if you were to give any advice to these young girls coming through, or some words of encouragement, what would you say to them?
Well, I'd say to be fearless in doing what they love, in doing just that. Be fearless in running through the whole team if you can. Be fearless in embracing your talents, in embracing the things that make you unique, and embracing what you are able to contribute to your team and to what you do. If you have the ability to run through 20 people, do that. Well, not 20, but maybe 15.
Sure.
Do that. If you have the ability to, to run far, do that. Because that's what you are able to contribute to your space. So it would be exactly that. Like, don't be scared to, do what you're good at. Like, just don't be scared. Because at least in my experience, I felt that I was scared a lot of the time, and so I had to find courage somewhere to do a lot of the things that I've done. So just don't be scared. Don't be scared. Just be fearless. Just be fearless.
Babalwa, thank you very, very much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time and taking the call to join us and share your story. We're so happy to have you and to celebrate you. I think that's what this episode has been about, celebrating the person behind this incredible journey. Also just reflecting on that journey and helping others along the way learn and pick up their own lessons from the story, because you are an instrumental part of women's rugby in this country, and having you share your story and motivate the next generation can only breed more excellence for this amazing country. Thank you very, very much. And we wish you all of the best with the new seasons with the Harlequins. We saw you signed it. And I mean, you've said it, you've declared on the social media pages.
Yeah, no,
There's a video of you.
It's done. It's done. So I'll be heading back
Yeah.
after the WXV, after
Yeah.
the test matches. I'll be heading back for another season with them.
Now, listen, we wish you all of the best with the new season as well.
Thank you.
And with the
thank you.
WXV, you know, the ladies are doing some amazing things. And Cape Town, South Africa, this is our time to support the
look out
women.
for it.
Let's get out there and show our support for South African women's rugby, because it is definitely on the rise. Thank you very,
Thank you.
very much. And
Thank you.
we wish you all
Appreciate
of the
it.
best.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Good morning, I'm Tara Wilson, and this is my story in my words.